if the number one priority to gospel leadership is integrity in our character, the undoing of strong character, strong leadership, would be a divided life, where what we say and what we do doesn't align. In Crete, this was a big problem. There was a mismatch to what people were saying they believed and then what they were doing. This mismatch of when confession and conduct drift apart is what Paul was seeing in Crete. Before the gospel came to Crete, among other things, the island was largely known as having a group of people who would essentially be like guns for hire. Like they were just available to do that kind of work. They would take to the seas, pirating and looting, sometimes for fun, sometimes for work. And it was culturally permissible, very normal, even expected that people would lie. It's just what was done. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't seen as a bad thing. It was just part of the culture. Paul quotes a Cretan prophet saying, "Cretans are always liars, evil brutes, lazy gluttons." To kind of right-size this concept, you can think about eye contact, for example. So in Western cultures, direct eye contact is meant to communicate engagement and honesty and confidence. Is it working? But in East Asian and African cultures, prolonged eye contact, especially with an elder or an authority figure, can communicate disrespect or arrogance and even be confrontational. The thing I love about this example is that it's the exact same behavior, but the meaning changes within a different culture. So Paul isn't saying that the Cretans were uniquely evil. He's just naming that certain behaviors are so accepted in the culture that no one questions them anymore. That's just normal. It's just what we do. And he wants the Cretans to question the embedded norm of separating the belief and actions. That saying one thing and doing another. He wants them to question that perhaps that's problematic. Titus 1:16 is the hinge verse of this entire epistle. They claim to know God, but by their actions they deny him. Part of what the gospel does in our leadership is to push back on what our culture says is normal. It challenges the familiar, in this case lying, and the thought that belief and practice could even be separated, that would even be an option. I think this is probably true for us. Even this exact same example. There are places where we might have an instinct to compartmentalize our faith in certain settings. Jokingly, we say all the time, like, hey, don't put that Christian fish or the bumper sticker on your car, because then you can drive however you want. And you don't need to worry about reflecting poorly on God. John Wayne is one of those people. So you've probably seen him on the road. His passengers are strapped in multiple seatbelts just to stay in the seat. I've been that person, so I say it from experience, lived it. I've personally gotten the feedback that when I'm in go mode, I'm just so focused on the thing at hand that everything else is a blur. Humans are a blur. Things that are being said, not heard. I'm just working so completely that, am I following Christ? I don't know, because I'm doing a thing. I just forget everything. I can only see the thing in front of me. Perhaps that's an example. It's certainly one for me, but maybe one for you of where, how would it be to invite our faith into that space? There are likely lots of places where this is true for us, where we set our faith aside in either big or small ways. How do you do it? Where are those places for you? Where are those places in your home, in your classroom, in your boardroom, when you're on the field, when you're in the grocery store? What does that look like? Jesus speaks to the separation of belief and practice in a very clear way in Matthew 23. It can be summarized by saying, don't be a hypocrite. Specifically, in talking to his disciples and the crowds, he says, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat, so you must be careful to do everything they tell you. He's saying what they say is good. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. Paul will spend most of the rest of this letter arguing that God's work of salvation And the believer's life of obediently living all of that out must go hand in hand because it's our witness. And when it doesn't, when belief and behavior kind of drift away from each other, the gospel itself gets distorted. It's not the message of Jesus if we say that we value love, forgiveness, humility, and faith, and then we don't have those things in our lives. It turns the gospel into this like decorative word art. Granted, middle-aged women love this stuff. I know. But it's only motivational wall clutter if it's not consistent with the way we live our lives. My grandpa, who lived throughout the Depression and the Dust Bowl in a farm in North Dakota, could never get over it that it was Christians who bought their stuff, who bought their animals, and who ultimately bought their farm for pennies on the dollar. He would bring it up well into his 80s, telling the whole story about how these were his neighbors who claimed to be Christians. And every time the story ended with him saying he wanted no part of a faith like that. I mean, I'm a pastor. We had lots of these conversations. This experience was so formative for me. It was written on my heart, not only because I heard it 1 million times, but because it wasn't someone who wanted to argue about theology or the doctrine of Jesus, but it was someone who was so deeply hurt by the inconsistency of professed faith and actions. It was huge. Paul was telling Titus, and he's telling us today, that our confession of faith is reflected in how we live our lives, and it cannot be separated. This integration of our faith and actions is our practice of the gospel. It's discipleship. It's how our character gets formed and reformed. It's what creates trust in places that we lead and that we have influence. We don't do this perfectly, but remember, that's not the metric we're even using. Building character shapes trust, and trust shapes the church's witness.